data team and what we're sort of our brief overview, what we're aiming to do, what our goals are, to put the workshop in some context. And then you'll get a brief introduction about the IHCC Cohort Atlas, what's possible, what you can do with it, and that's Brandon Chan from OICR is going to give that overview. And then I guess we get into the sort of meat of the kind of session, which is really where we're going to be looking at how we do this cohort metadata harmonization, how we do it in particular in IHCC, and how and really to try and it's really to get sort of a knowledge sharing, expertise sharing on how we do this process. And I hope, I hope that that it is useful in a more general context, but also with the goal of trying to expand the content and the representation of the cohorts in the IHCC Cohort Atlas. And then we're going to get a live demo of how we actually do this process, and Carlos and Israel are going to lead that session. So that will really step you through the process of how we need to get your interaction to get your cohort to be registered in the Cohort Atlas. And there's sort of there's two-way sort of interaction on that. All right, so the IHCC data and infrastructure team, I mean, what we're really focused on trying to do is deliver interoperable cross-cohort infrastructure. And really it's to make cohort data more widely accessible, discoverable to the wider scientific community. And there are probably hundreds of human cohort studies around the world. I mean, there's a really nice map, I haven't put it in the slides here, that tries to lay those out. And I think our goal here is really to make that data discoverable, reusable, and increase the value basically of those cohorts, so that they can really be used to make sort of more scientific breakthroughs. Next slide. So, I mean, if you think about that problem, I mean, you can break it down into a set of challenges, and it's, these challenges have been talked about many times before, and I think they are really the kind of core set of data challenges when it comes to cohort data. So the first one is how to make cohort data discoverable, how to build things like discovery networks, how to be able to issue go into a website and be able to query 50 or 100 cohorts to ask basic questions about their participants, what type of study it is. If you've got all the way into the sort of more detailed kind of queries about the fields and the participants in the study, maybe the disease types. I mean, you can come up with all sorts of really different queries at different levels of complexity. The discovery problem is really linked to the cohort level metadata. I mean, cohorts are collected at different times for different purposes, using different coding schemes, different ontologies, different control vocabularies. And this really comes back to that harmonization problem. And that's really what we're going to be focusing quite a bit of our time on in this session. I mean, there are other challenges once you get past the discovery and harmonization. I mean, the other ones are like, how do you get access to the cohort data? I mean, how do you get authorization? And then how do you actually do the analysis? Can the cohort data, can it move? Does it have, maybe it's got genomic data or genetic data that's really very large, size or scale, and maybe you have to bring your analysis tools to the data. Maybe it can't leave the jurisdictions. There's a whole lot of detailed questions around that access and authorization and how you do the analysis, how you do cross-cohort analysis. Next slide. So I guess we're focusing in this session on the discovery and the cohort level metadata harmonization. That's really what we're going to focus on for this session. Next slide. The whole cohort space, I mean, it is quite a standards rich space. There are, I mean, this whole idea of interoperability between the cohorts is really becoming a really huge focus for many of the world's biggest sort of scientific funders are realizing that we have to solve this problem really to really leverage the full value of human cohorts. There is group organizations like the GA4GH, the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, are doing a lot of work around trying to get better standardization for how you do things like discovery, how you do data, how you get access to human data, how you do, getting more alignment on the ethics and how you describe the data use, maybe how you can more in a more standardized way describe how you can what purposes a cohort can be reused for what types of research. And then, of course, in the clinical space, there is a lot of really, there are several standards emerging, I guess, in the clinical space. I guess HS7 and FHIR will be one of the maybe most widely used. I think if you just go to the next slide. So I've just put a picture of some of the various standards that are emerging from GA4GH, and they are getting sort of more widespread adoption, I think. Standards like the Beacon network is really focused around discovery of cohorts and of samples of interest. Things like phenopackets are used, are really used around trying to have a standardized way to exchange metadata, exchange individual level metadata, but also at a higher level, just having a standardized way to exchange metadata fields. Data use ontology, I guess, is a standardized way of trying to describe how you can, what sort of research a particular cohort is suitable for. And you can kind of think, it's quite obvious that you may want to issue, if you're trying to find cohorts of interest, you may want to do queries that say, well, I want to do ancestry research. What cohorts are suitable for that type of research? So there's different angles to the cohort discovery problem. Next slide. Yeah, so the progress to date, I'm only got a couple more slides, but in terms of our progress to date, we did launch the IHCC Cohort Atlas with an initial set of, I think, 6 cohorts. It has now expanded to 13. We have managed to harmonize over 100 variables. We had a quite successful collaboration with the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, where we added a number of mental health focused cohorts. And really the goal, in particular for this session and going forward, is really to expand the representation of the cohorts ideally to the full set of IHCC cohorts, and really make the Atlas be a sort of cornerstone for how you just find cohorts of interest with that are relevant and suitable for your type of research question. And this is where we really want to get your input on being able to get your cohort represented in the Atlas. Next slide. So looking ahead, we're thinking, I listed out some of the challenges that we really want to be able to address in the sort of 3 to 5 year time frame. We're focusing, initially on this discovery and metadata harmonization problem, because we think that's the fundamental challenges to finding cohorts. So that's the one we thought makes the most sense to focus on first. So the next 1 to 2 years, we really want to expand and get on the cohort representation and content in the IHCC Atlas, expanding the harmonized metadata model that we've been building with IHCC and with the other projects like the Seneca project, and we're also in discussions with other cross-cohort initiatives to try and get alignment between our metadata model and theirs. And you'll hear more about that from Melanie. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, and then I guess, another focus will be for the Atlas itself is to expand it to have more sort of complex and interactive queries, and then also to get it to link into other discovery networks. There is certainly the Beacon network is one of those, is a J4GH initiative that is adding more and more human data organizations and projects to that network. In Europe, the Elixir Beacon network again uses the same standard, but again, it's linking many of the European initiatives. And we ideally would like to get the IHCC Atlas then to be able to talk to these networks, so you can issue sort of federated queries beyond the cohorts in the IHCC Atlas. Next slide. Yep, and then going beyond that into the sort of 3 to 5 year time frame, we really want to be able to have sort of an ecosystem where once you do the initial discovery and you find the cohorts of interest, then you've clearly got a research question that you want to be able to ask across those cohorts. So you want to be able to then get access and authorization to be able to, you want to be able to sort of issue sort of standardized access and authorization query to those cohorts of interest. And then maybe depending on the model of data sharing for the cohort, maybe you have to log into their infrastructure. You maybe got to bring your analysis to the cohort. And we're seeing the emergence of that with things like the UK Biobank cloud platform. We're seeing that with things like the AD Workbench and the all of us /Terra environment. These are starting to emerge. So it's really getting the discovery then connected to the access and authorization to be able to do your analysis, be it in the model that suits that is appropriate for the cohorts of interest. And there is this whole area is really quite a standards rich area, and I think we are now getting the standards to make this possible. This is going to be a long problem to solve, but we have to solve this. The potential benefits are huge. Next slide. All right, okay, that's the introduction from me. I'm going to hand you over to Brandon, who's going to tell you a bit more about the IHCC Atlas maybe, and how it works, what you can do with it, and I guess a little bit of a demo about it.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Great. I'm just going to share my screen here in presentation mode. So I'm Brandon. I'm from the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research. We provide the underlying technology for the Atlas browser, specifically the search and index infrastructure, and then the UI itself for exploration. Just a bit of preamble here. The IHCC Cohort Atlas fits directly into the overall IHCC vision, of course, and goal to bring large cohorts together, to encourage data sharing, improve efficiencies, and maximize benefits when addressing the scientific questions that no party can really answer by themselves. The browser that we provide is a very simple to use, easy to access UI for researchers to quickly search for a cohort of interest. Now the cohorts and their metadata are first consolidated and harmonized before being published and exposed on the browser. And later, of course, I'll hand that off to Melanie, Isuru, and Carlos to get into the meat of that. But once you've narrowed down the cohorts that you are interested in, users can then further explore those of their own accord. And really the key is the Atlas browser acts as a gateway or a portal for users to get to those cohorts of interest and then pursue further detailed specific exploration and analysis. Now I do have some static slides with screenshots, but I think it's best to go through a short live demonstration if everyone can bear with me. So at ihccglobal.org, we have the browser that Thomas briefly flashed up earlier. Now, some of you have probably seen similar data exploration portals in the past with similar user experiences and mechanics, but I will give you a brief overview of how these work. So obviously, you see right away sort of the full set of cohorts that are available in the Atlas. But if I want to do search or filter down to what I really want, I'm really using what we call the filter panel on the left-hand side. And the filter panel basically gives you all of the attributes or the metadata that define those cohorts. So you can see here, if I just quickly minimize, there's cohort name, the countries of interest. There's some toggles that indicate whether those cohorts have certain data types. So do they have biospecimens? Do they have genomic data, phenotypic clinical data, so on and so forth? I'm not going to go through all of these attributes. You're all free to explore this on your own. But the key is that there's a wealth of metadata that you can use to find the cohorts that are particular to the research that you're doing. So the filter panel on the left is what you use to control what you see. In the middle, you see a table, and that's essentially just the results, the cohorts that you filtered down and that you want to access. In the top, as I go through this, you'll see your actual query being built as you select your filters on the left-hand side. So for example, if I'm interested in cancer research and I want to see which cohorts have cancer data, if I go down to the disease filter here on the left-hand side, I'll click cancer. You can see already, I can see that there's 9 cohorts with cancer. But as I interact with that control, the screen dynamically refreshes and you see the results. And you can see in the top bar, your query is built dynamically as you enter that. So I'm interested in cancer cohorts, but perhaps specifically, I want to work with, blood biosamples. So if I go to my biosample criteria on the left hand here, I can see there's actually 5 blood cohorts with blood sample types. And once I click that, you can see that the query on the top gets built dynamically, and my results are also refreshing dynamically as I play around. 2 other things of interest that we've built into this portal are 2 visualizations at the top. So you see 2 nice charts. They're basically quick summaries of the cohorts that you found as you're building your query. So we show a breakdown of the cohorts by country based on your search criteria, and then a breakdown of the biosample types. So you can see here, if I hover over blood, there are the 5 cohorts that you see down below. And Thomas mentioned future enhancements to the portal. There's always the opportunity to add more such visualizations as we get more data or we have more enhanced visualization requirements. Now, there are different types of controls in the filter panel. So one useful control might be the number of participants in the cohort. So you can see under current enrollment on the left, we have a slider bar. So perhaps I have these 5 cohorts, but I need a significant amount of data to study. So I may want to have a lower threshold of, let's say, more than 50,000 participants. So I can adjust my slider here. I won't be too exact here. Let's just say around 49,000. So the results dynamically refresh. Okay, so here's 3 cohorts that are related to cancer. They have blood sample types and they meet my minimum enrollment threshold. So now that I have these 3, I may want to pursue further analysis, look at some publications, read their literature. Each of these results, we indicate the lead PI and then a link to their website so you can do some further exploration on your own. Okay, so here I've linked out to the Africa Health Research Institute because I'm interested in that one, and I can always go back to the browser and continue my exploration. So as you can see right now, it's a very easy to use, lightweight user experience. And later, in the 5-year plan, there's definitely opportunities to enhance this with even more rich features for exploration and analysis. So just doing a quick time check. I'm still good. I'm just going to go quickly back to my slides and just give a very brief description of the underlying technology for those interested. The technology we use to launch the search and index, as well as the graphical user interface, is based on ORCR's Overture product suite. It is an open source product suite. We're using 2 specific components from that suite. Without getting too technical, for anyone who's interested, feel free to visit our website at overture.bio.com. Again, this is not self-promotion, but more to let the community know that we do have open source components to help scientific researchers stand up data portals in very short time. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, feel free to have a look. So now back to the atlas itself. That was a quick walkthrough. If there's no questions, I guess I will hand it over to Melanie for the next part of the talk.
Yeah, I will share my screen again.
Wonderful, thanks, Carlos.
Okay.
All right, so thanks Thomas and Brandon for the very useful introductions and demonstration. I just want, so Brandon showed you the front end of the Atlas browser, the UI, which is what you would be interacting as the user, trying to discover and search over cohorts and filter for discovery. I want to tell you a little bit more about the other hand of the process, which is, as a cohort owner, what happens when you submit your data to the Atlas and how we bring it into the Atlas and then push it to the UI. And again, Carles and Isuru will follow up with really a hands-on presentation. So this is really just an overview of the process to kind of situate yourself in the pipeline. So on the next slide, please, Carles. So what we've done in terms of bringing the cohort data together, we've built a common framework, which, not unlike a flat packing company, is about taking data models that we can use to represent the cohort data in particular, using some of our toolings to deploy a pipeline and automate the process as much as possible to make it as painless as possible for submitters, and then bring those together and deploy that for clinical cohorts. On the next slide, in terms of models, I don't want to go into too much details, but on the next slide, the models we've been using for cohort is called GECO, which stands for Genomics Cohort Knowledge Ontology. It derived from the Seneca project, where we had a limited set of cohorts. We had only 10 of them, and we've just done a survey to kind of identify the most common fields that cohorts were representing. And we've built a model based on that. So that model is GECO. If you look at the picture on the right-hand side, you can see that it describes things like laboratory measures or biosamples, some basic cohort attributes, such as the aims and objectives of the cohort. It can have questionnaires and survey data, so information about life exposure and medication and behaviors and things like that. And as I mentioned, this is really a starting point for the model, and we anticipate that this will expand and grow as new cohorts join the Atlas and as we work with you to add your data and make sure this is descriptive enough to cover your use cases and your cohort data. This is really a high-level overview of the ontology. It goes deeper, but I didn't want to confuse the presentation here. It's all available online as well. It's all released under CC BY, so anybody can access it. On the next slide, please, Carlos. So we have that model, and it's about bringing the cohort dictionary, using that model into what we're calling our cohort registry and our cohort mapping. On the next slide, a really short overview of the registry. The registry is really pretty much what the name says. So it's really a collections of all the cohort dictionaries in one place. You can search, you can do text search and things like that. So you can either look into your favorite cohort dictionary, or you can look for a specific search term, and you will be able to browse the information in the different dictionaries we have harmonized. It also allows us to do some of the technical nitty-gritty, things like version change. If the source updates, we can rerun the conversion, update the registry, and that's all built on a suite of standards we have. So as Brandon showed you the suite of standards for the UI side, we also have a suite of tools on the backend side, and Carlos and Iso will show you some of those later as well. The next slide is about the mapping. So if you remember, we need to bring the existing cohort dictionary and align that with our GECO model. So there are mapping between a specific cohort. Here you can see, for example, COGES at the bottom left and the GECO mapping. And we wanted to be able to store those mapping independently to make them reusable as well. So for example, I think Robert is here. We were talking about mapping to the OMOP model. If we can build a mapping between GECO and OMOP, that would allow any other cohort reusing the same to be kind of built in and be able to really immediately join the Atlas very easily. And there's different parameters. And again, we're using a shared suite of tools which provide APIs and things like that. On the next slide, please, Carlos. So this is really the top level. If there's one thing to remember from this presentation, I think that would be the one. So this is on the left-hand side, cohort owners are able to provide a cohort dictionary using an Excel template. We are using a Droid pipeline, which Carlos and Isoro will demonstrate, using a curation tooling and so on and so on. That's really the internals where, it happens kind of by magic. And it outputs an updated spreadsheet with the mapping. Once this is reviewed by the cohort submitter, everything gets pushed automatically into the registry, into the mappings, and then ultimately done into the Atlas. So this is really the very high level pipeline overview for cohort owners. On the next slide, please, Carlos. So bringing all that together, and specifically for IHCC, putting it in the context of that global framework I mentioned earlier. On the next slide, please, Carlos. So I've told you about, starting from the right-hand side, I talked to you about the GECO model, which represents the cohort attributes, the biomedical data, which would be the cohort dictionary, bringing those together using a pipeline, feeding that into the data cohort registry, and then pushing that to the UI that Brendan presented, the Cohort Atlas, and that allows end user to run their discovery queries. The only thing I wanted to add here is that we are not doing any of this in isolation. It's very important for us to reuse technologies, standards, tooling that are already out there. So we're reusing models and tools from the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. We've talked extensively with Maelstrom, for example, who also has a standard to describe cohort, and other projects represented here. On the next slide, please, Carles. The advantage of doing those things not in isolation, but by reusing tooling and by reusing models and standards, is that the pipeline can easily be reused. So we were able to repurpose with the OICR team the whole harmonization and front-end pipeline for a new project, the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, for example. And the next slide, please, Carles. The other advantage is because it's all using standards, technologies, and languages. We can extend the model. So this is work we've started, for example, with Maurice Firth, where we want to provide more interoperability with existing cohort registries. So we are working on better defining, for example, the admin side of the cohort metadata. And again, more importantly for people here, I think the important thing is the model, the Gecko model itself can also be extended. So if you have specific data that is not yet covered, we can add that into the model, and that will then trickle down all the way and become a new category, a new filter in the UI that Brandon was showing. So nothing is static, it is meant to evolve. You are meant to find gaps in what we're currently representing, and please help us fill those gaps with your data. My next and next slide is really just a reminder of what the IHCC Cohort Atlas looks. So you have the left-hand side to do the filtering, the cohort presentation and display in the middle, reference to cohort site. And again, this was done by the OICR team, Krishna and Philippe and Brandon as well. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any question, and I'm passing back on to Carles and Iso.
Okay, thank you, Melanie.
Should we, I guess we have a little bit of time. Should we pause for a second just for any questions if there are any, maybe before we go into the sort of real meat, yep, the Carlos's demo, and yeah. Anyone has any questions, maybe just put your virtual hand up, maybe.
I'll ask one if you don't mind. Just want to know how long. It was great to, Melanie, for you to outline that process. Could you just give us a sense of how long it takes from the time you receive the data dictionary to the time it might actually get integrated into the Atlas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously it depends on, the size of the dictionary, the amount of mapping that needs to be done. In terms of the technical aspects, it can be quite fast. Like the pipeline runs fairly fast. Carles, if you don't mind going back to the overview, the general overview, please. No, that would be slide 20. So this one, no, sorry. So the limiting step is the review step. It's okay, it's a little bit further, doesn't matter. It's the review step. So if you remember, the cohort owners submit their templates, their filled-in template, and then that gets mapped using this one. Yes, thanks, Carles. This gets mapped using that pipeline that Carles and Isoro will show. And the step here, the little table in the middle, is where we propose a mapping between what the cohort owner submitted and what we think, or rather the automated curation tool think is the right match. And that's the step that needs to be reviewed manually in collaboration between the cohort owner and the IHCC data steward. So depending on, I guess, human availability, it can be quite fast or it can take a little bit longer. Overall, for an average size cohort, which is a bit subjective, we think it's maybe to 10 hours overall between the formatting of the data dictionary to fit the template, the running of the pipeline, the manual review. And then once it's populated in the cohort registry, OICR automatically pulls. I think it's a nightly process, and maybe Brandon can confirm, but it's very quick to reload.
Yeah, I believe it is nightly, but I can confirm.
Right. Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
So hand up from Ron Lang.
Yeah, it's nice work. Good to see that the IHCC Atlas now is live and people can request the data. I have a question about the access to the data. I'm sure that the data access is controlled access. Then who is going to approve the request? Do we have a team that review the data access request and the approval for them to access the data?
That's that's a tricky question. In this, so we haven't tried to try to address the standardized access problem yet. That's, I mean, clearly at the moment now you find the cohort of interest and you have to then go and look at whatever the access procedure or process is on a per cohort basis, and that, you know, that can be quite time consuming, and you've got to log into maybe 10 different systems to try and do that. But I guess and complete different access requests. But the vision is that where we want to get to is to be able to then maybe from the Atlas to a standardized application process, and then be able to send that, you know, complete it maybe once maybe, and then send it to the cohorts that you have that you think are of interest to your research question. So right now we haven't tried to address that problem yet, but it is something that we do certainly want to try to accelerate that data access process. And I think, you know, there are now standards that are coming out and are being deployed across different cohort infrastructures. I mean, this whole idea of the GA4GH research passports is a standard that's emerging and being implemented now as a way of a standardized way of presenting your research credentials to a data controller. And yeah, it's an area that really, yeah, there's really huge improvements that can be made, but it really needs engagement, you know, from many of the cohorts to be able to agree on a common application process, and that's a really huge challenge. But
yeah, once we have this workshop and then people know which data in the Atlas, they might browse those parameters and think about the project. And when they got the project formed, then they might need to access the data. Yeah, I think at least we can talk about this at the workshop in November, and the policy group might help the Atlas group or data standardization group to establish the data access agreement or what we need to do for the next. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Thanks, Thomas.
It's certainly an area that IHCC could try and provide some coordination or leadership on, yeah, through a working group. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so maybe we'll hand back
There's a question from Robert in the chat, Thomas.
Oh, right. Let's see.
I think it's about the manual aspects, yes.
Yeah, maybe you can field that question, perhaps, maybe?
Sure. So in terms of pulling the data in, I mean, you're right, ideally that's what would happen. At the moment, unfortunately, the cohorts we've talked to are very heterogeneous in terms of the format they're using initially. So we've had, you know, PDFs and Excel spreadsheets and things like that. I think the best hope and maybe the best target for automation is with respect to the mapping tools I mentioned, where we're hoping to reuse mappings from existing cohorts. With respect to pulling the data in, if there was a way, so we pull some of the data in from the IHCC website, where when cohorts join IHCC, they do provide part of the admin metadata to, I think, Chip, who then merge all that in that big IHCC membership table on the website. So we're pulling that in. Yeah, the other efforts we're doing is trying to have those standards for cohort representation through GF4GH again. I think if we were able to somehow standardize some of the input, we'd be able to pull in a little bit more easily. But yeah, we're limited by the, I guess, the syntactic heterogeneity starting with.
Thanks, Melanie. Yeah. I really would emphasize the heterogeneity of when you look across on IHCC, you get the full span of how data dictionaries for the cohorts are recorded in varying levels of structure. So we've encountered that, I guess, already with some of the initial cohorts. Great. Okay, I don't see any.
So I've got a quick second. Sorry, I'm having some issues, but I'll be able to participate more actively in a little bit. Because I hear you. I don't think there is anybody doing a lot of this yet, but it seems like, especially for bigger cohorts, especially as you ramp up, it's going to be really important to be able to somehow provide that API backend to be able to push these updates. For some other projects, and we don't supporting this in all of us right now, but we're looking at FHIR, the ideas of research studies. Can we capture a lot of the same metadata? The idea is, can we talk about these vocabulary terms that are captured and send that in and push that right into this process? I think it would be really cool, because I feel like maintaining this is just, I can't imagine the workload over time, right? If you get 50 cohorts and every year or every 6 months you have updates, it seems like it's really hard.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It's another excellent point. So we haven't really worked on the update pipeline yet, but you're right that this is coming soon. We know that we support versioning because it's all backend, it's all GitHub and versioning. So we would support that. The update at the moment, you'd have to update the spreadsheet and rerun the pipeline. So we don't do incremental updates at the moment. But on the bright side, because we're using all those standards and working with all those other networks, like you mentioned FHIR, we're also working with packets in GF4GH to define that common cohort message, which then gives us a buy-in from FHIR. So I think there's an IHCC and there's a larger community aspect where I'm hopeful that we'll come together and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I welcome having these scaling issues that are coming, because it really, it means that what we've started is succeeding essentially if we have scaling challenges. So yeah, it is starting small, but the Atlas is growing, and all of these things about updates, scaling up to bigger cohorts. These are great challenges to have, and I think the basis is there to be able to address them. And I agree that looking at these use cases, I think will be going forward it is one of the next steps. Absolutely. All right. Okay, I don't see any more hands up, so maybe we'll hand back to Carlos to continue. I think
there's one more from Natasha on the Odyssey standard for submission. Maybe I can answer that one with respect to submission of the Excel format. So of course, we have our own bespoke Excel format. I think Carlos will show it just now. We don't support Odyssey right now, but as said, we're hoping to just be able to use OMOP, and then so if your cohort were to be using the OMOP model, then we just be able to reuse the model directly. But that's a good point with respect to supporting different existing standards for the format for submission. Thanks.
Great. All right, Carlos, you're up.
Okay, so I will just explain the process that the user, the submitter of the cohort, will do in our workflow. So there will be one person that will be a data dictionary owner that will want to submit the data to be processed. The first thing this person will have to do is to access this website, in which we have documentation about all the different aspects of the workflow that we have set up. And in here, this person will be able to download an Excel file. And this Excel file is the one that will send us with the information. So this is just to show you this Excel file, has 3 different tabs. The first has the instructions, that is just a summary of the information that needs to be introduced in the other 2 tabs. And as you can see, there are some terms that are mandatory and others are optional. So the metadata, in the metadata tab, the submitter would provide the general information of the cohort. And in the terminology tab, they would provide the terms for the data dictionary that they want to harmonize. In here, as you have seen here, the label is mandatory and the others are optional. So this is an example of some terms that can be normalized, and the definition, for instance, but the other cells can be filled in also. And the comment site is to add comments that would be specific for us if we need to know something specific about this. So the submitter would fill in this Excel file and it will send it to this email address. And this would create a request for us. In this case, the data steward will receive this request and this person would review that the information provided is correct. And then the harmonization process would begin. And this is done in this Droid instance that Melanie has showed you before. And the steps that I will show you afterwards in a demo are that from this Excel file, a TSV is created, and we do the mapping to the Gecko. From this, a new Google Sheet is created, and we share this Google Sheet with the submitter. So we'll have a communication with the submitter of this data dictionary to check and complete the terms that need to be harmonized. So this is the example that I showed you before, and this is what the submitter would see. In here, there is a new code for instance, this cohort. If it was called COA, this would be new IDs for these terms. On the right side, you would see the confidence of the suggestions from the Gecko. And in here, the suggestions that the workflow provides you. And this is a drop down that if you click, you would be able to choose, I will show you now, between different options. So the idea is that there will be a communication between the submitter and us to fill in the best way these different terms. Once the submitter thinks that is correct and it's complete, this person would communicate to us, and then we will do the last steps in which we use GitHub to have this information, and we will do a pull and a merge. And from this new file, these old files will be created that contain the information. And then these files are the ones that are pushed to the OLS, that is what Melanie has showed you before. That is the site that contains all the data dictionaries. And then this data dictionary would be stored there. And then we would communicate with the OICR, with Brandon, and the people from Atlas would pull the information from the GitHub and will be uploaded directly into the Atlas. So, and this is done, I think, every 24 hours, I think. And then you would be able to see the information of this cohort in the Atlas as a new option. Okay, and just for you to know all the people that has been involved and is being involved in this workflow for the data harmonization. So now I will just show you the real process that we would do. So when I would receive a request, I would create a new branch with the code of the new cohort, and it will create a new Droid branch takes a few seconds. And you will see that in general, the steps are more or less fast. Okay, so okay, now it has finished. So we would create a new branch and we would upload the core data. In here, we would add the email from the person and we would upload the Excel file that the submitter sent us. And then this would be the file that the submitter has sent. It would have this general information completed. And then this is just to show just some terms to be harmonized. So then we would run the automated mapping. And this is the step for the mapping of Gecko. And this takes around 30 seconds, I think. Yeah, and so now I will show you the Excel file with the suggestions of the Gecko. And this is the work that will be done with the submitter. Then I would share this file with the submitter, and then we would work together to complete in the best way the harmonization. And I think that, of course, today my internet is a bit slower than usual, but okay. So this has been completed. And now if I check the Excel file, this would be the results that we would get. So as I showed you before, there is a new ID for this specific cohort. These are the terms that the submitter has provided, the definition. And these are the suggested terms from the Gecko. Gecko has terms that were introduced and also terms reused from other ontologies. So for instance, in the term sex, the suggestion of the maximum confidence of biological sex. So we can be confident that these suggestions are correct. And for those that couldn't fill, you have here certain suggestions. And if you click on the dropdown, you have the different terms that the Gecko has. And at the top, you would have the suggestions that the Gecko provides, and then you have the terms ordered alphabetically. So in this case, it could be survey administration term, the name. Of course, this is a very simple case. We'll have very complex data dictionaries. So this will be the work that we'll have to do in the different submissions. And as Melanie said, there will be terms that maybe are not in the Gecko ontology because there is not a lot of granularity. So we'll have to decide until which granularity we want to get with this. Okay, so this is the work that we will do with the users. We would share with the submitter, and when it's done, we'll run validation. But well, as now it's a bit slow, I think I'm just gonna explain the different steps because it's not that important for the user. So we will do all these different steps, we would get the final file that would be committed and pushed to the GitHub. And in our GitHub, then we will merge to the master branch, and this would provide the information, the new data dictionary, to the master branch that then is accessible by the other parts. So once this is merged, Isuru would pull the information to be added to the OLS. And I will show you here. This is a test OLS that we have. And if I had done all the processing, this is an example of the same file. And this would be the new data dictionary for this cohort. So you would have the different terms that has been harmonized. And it will, if you enter it, it would provide information of the ontology that corresponds to this term. And for the different terms, you have on the right side the different information. And I wanted to show you also, this is a test instance that we have, but this is the main OLS site. And in here, you can access, for instance, the Gecko data dictionary. And in here, you can see the different levels of information that we have. So you can check also how is our structure, and you also will have the different information here on the right side. And you can also check other cohorts that have been harmonized and that are already in the atlas. You can check the different data dictionaries that have been used for their harmonization. And the last step. So first, we would upload the data in the OLS, and then the last step will be for the OICR group to pull this information, and as I told you before, upload it in the Atlas so that it can be accessed through the Atlas browser. And yes, so this is the live demo that we wanted to explain. And if there are any questions about this process.
I guess kind of one obvious question is for the cohort, I guess data managers. I guess the real part of the only part of they need to do is this spreadsheet loop with you, basically getting the spreadsheet, initially filling it, and then sending it back and getting the suggestions and just cross-checking those. That's the key part for the cohort data managers, I guess, which is relevant to all here. The other parts of it, I guess, are mostly the kind of internals of how the process that you go through, I guess, to get the data.
We just wanted to, as we have this chance, we wanted to give a general overview for only the people to know how is the process. But the main thing that the user will do is to provide us with the Excel file, and then we will share with the submitter a Google spreadsheet, and we will work in this spreadsheet to complete the terms for the harmonization. And this is the work that the submitter will do with us.
So how do they initiate this process? Who do they do it? Who do they contact? So say one of the cohorts, which I hope will happen soon it's represented on the call here, wants to get started with this. How do they get started? So
they can contact us directly, or they can contact this Google group email address also, and they can communicate with us, and we can clarify any issue they can have. And from this website, they can download directly the file. So it will be they want to communicate with us. Well, it will be maybe good, yeah. And then, yeah, they can download the Excel file and send it to us. And from there, we can communicate and collaborate to complete the file.
Right. Maybe you can, if you get a second in a few minutes, put the contact details in the chat. I see there's a hand up from Farida. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Farida Akhtari. I'm with the Personalized Environment and Gene Study at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. And we are interested in getting our cohort data into the IHCC Atlas. So this was really helpful. Thank you so much for going through all the details. One, if y'all could share your slides from today, that would be really helpful. They had some useful links that I could look into. And second question is, our cohort has a lot of disparate and multi-dimensional data. So we have survey data, we have GIS data, we have whole genome sequence data. So the spreadsheet that you showed, do we create multiple of those for each of our data types?
I think I guess I can try and field this question, and Melanie, Carlos, feel free to jump in. I guess this spreadsheet here is really aimed at getting the sort of cohort level and the metadata, the fields that span across all of the participants in your study, no matter what data type, the specific data type you've collected on the cohort. So this is really trying to capture your sort of data dictionary, your cohort dictionary, I guess, is really what we're trying to do. So I think you can just fill it once, perhaps, and you don't have to put like, I guess you don't have to put sort of it's really just trying to capture the fields or the terms that you're recording your metadata about your overall cohort. If you have whole genome, then you can put, yes, whole genome sequencing. It doesn't have to be that it's for subsets of your cohort. You can just put the superset of all of the fields that you're collecting. Because then that will get registered, like, if someone comes in with a query, tell me the cohorts that have some whole genome sequencing. It doesn't have to be all of them. And then yours would get listed in that query, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So the terminology sheet is just all of the data dictionary terms that we have in our cohort. You just want us to list all of them into that terminology sheet that Carlos just showed. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct. And, as Carlos also mentioned, is that at the moment, so what's going to happen is that dictionary is going to get mapped to the Gecko model, and you may very well find, if you have more complex cohort dictionary and you capture more data than what we're currently able to represent, you may find that some of the fields are not mapped or the mapping is poor. And then at that point in time, it's really critical. It's really, useful in terms of evolving the model. If you're able to say, you guys are not representing imaging data the way I would need it for the type of discoveries my users are doing, or the type of use case I'm aiming at supporting. And then we can extend the model based on that input and work with you to do that.
Okay, great, thank you. That was actually one of my other questions too, that what happens when the terms just like the Gecko algorithm in the backend just is not able to map it? What do we do with those terms? And what happens, I guess maybe this is too much down the line, and maybe I do need to get started with the process to understand this, but I'll ask it anyway. What about the individual, just as an example, like we have a whole bunch of like roughly 1,800 survey responses or questions that participants have answered. How do those get incorporated into the data dictionary / the interface and the IHCC Atlas, or is that too deep a detail to show on the Atlas and it wouldn't be shown?
That's another great question. You're kind of preempting some of the future work we're trying to do. So it's really good to see that we seem to have the same idea. So there's two things that are interesting in your question, which we thought about, and we'd love to hear your feedback. The first one is with respect to counting the number of responses. So at the moment, we have the attributes, but even if you say I'm collecting whole genome sequencing data, we don't have a count for that data. So that's one of the things we'd like to do, where you'd be able to say we've collecting 1,800 of that data type. So that's one of the things we'd like to do. And the other one is the mapping at the moment is very, I guess, string based and based on current existing mappings, but we don't store the original survey question. So your original survey question could be something like, I don't know, how many packs of cigarettes have you smoked in the last 2 years or last week? But we would just map that to tobacco use history. And then we lose that kind of provenance and granularity. So that's another thing we'd be interested in doing. Once you say, you know, this is the cohort I'm interested in, we'd be able to display the actual survey questions that were mapped to the term, just to enrich, I guess, the provenance and make sure that that's actually the data you're looking for. But I'm sure there's something smarter we could do there, but we've started thinking about it.
Okay, great, thank you.
So it's funny, I think these are the same questions, and hi everybody, I'm a little bit more accessible now. I think those are some of the same kinds of questions that I have, because our cohort data with all of us is also equally complex, right? And the way we run the things, like we've got these tables, we have OAuth tables, but then, you know, the single data elements, I noticed one thing about the way the Gecko is organized is that, you know, there's information embedded in the hierarchy about the data sources as well, right? Which is not the same way. And so like, right, survey data, you've got these types. I might have disease survey data like as categories through Gecko. In some regards, you know, we might lump all that together. And so you might not even see that in the data dictionary because it's not, well, it's explicitly encoded, but in a different field that describes the source provenance of the data record. So if I have a health, you know, I have a health record data element that says a history of breast cancer, and I have a personal self-report history of breast cancer, like those are actually two different elements that might even show up the same way, depending on how you look at the coding of the codes. And so anyway, I think it's really interesting because of the complexities, even just in modeling it and, you know, trying to span that across the different groups. So I guess I'm personally really invested in trying to get this working because we have a lot of similar things. And I'm actually going to go load up and see what the toolkit looks like kind of on the back end, because it, you know, maybe it's something I could lift and deploy for some other purposes. Because we're trying to do that same piece of like, how do we address the content harmonization as well as sort of just the metadata, and how do you make that clear and available also? Because it's, yeah, there are standards out there, but nobody's trying to do stuff this way typically.
One of the good thing that I think we've skipped for in the interest of, you know, time and not go too much in depth is that there's actually different versions of Gecko. So there's a proper ontological representation where you're going to have, you know, a proper upper level ontology, which is the basic formal ontology, and proper relationship and axioms and stuff. And then we kind of abstract that and we package it in an IHCC view. So the view that's going to be on the registry is going to be the view that we use specific annotation property to drive a specific view for the UI. So you can kind of model things the right way and then have them show in multiple places depending on the UI view you'd like to render.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm away on a sidetrack, but I think it is really important to kind of just make that separation between what's the best way to represent this cohort metadata information, and then what is needed. What does that data dictionary look like that's needed to drive the interface for the IHCC? And it's hard to bridge that and keep it separate because there isn't. And anyway, so I can stop. But I'm interested in.
Yeah, no, that's great. So if you look at the master Gecko, the ontological representation, we're using this. I think it's a subset type of annotation just to drive the display and be able to build those categories on demand. And that also means that you can, you know, if you wanted to use Gecko for all of us, but you'd want to have a different filtering categories, you could also do that.
Would it be possible for you all to share a real one of those mapping sheets that Carlos just showed? So it was great to see the toy example to understand the workflow. But I think as I am getting ready to do this workflow for our cohort, begs, I think it would be helpful if I could see one of the sheets from a real cohort that's already in the IHCC, if it's possible.
Yeah, I think we could absolutely get you that. Yeah, we can probably pull out one of the more complex ones. Yeah, because the toy example always looks nice and straightforward, but we could get you one that's got many more rows in it and was probably took several iterations to get it correct. Yeah, absolutely. Either if you want to pop your email in the chat, or we can or email us on that from the contact link on the webpage that Carlos put in the chat. Either is fine. Yeah, we can absolutely do that. Yeah. I guess, Melanie, you did some of the initial mappings. I mean, the toy example was like 10 rows. I mean, I guess you had some more that were quite a few more rows in that took a bit more work to get mapped and harmonized.
Yeah, the other thing is because we're using those. I briefly went over the Zoom accuracy tool. So we're building that knowledge base of mapping. So we're trying to learn from mapping. So the initial mappings were very manual, and it was actually our colleague Becky in Toronto who did a lot of the manual, mapping. But as we get more data, we're getting a little bit more agile in terms of providing automated mapping. The confidence threshold that Carlos was showing increases as well. So yeah, the process is getting better. But to go back to the point Robert was making with automating more, possibly the inputs, I'm not sure how we could go about that. I'd really love to hear, ideas, and I guess we can always make it better, but if you have suggestions on how we can ease the process, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah. You also have to start somewhere. So I think we've hopefully got a good start that hopefully we can start, even with the infrastructure we got now, we can start to get some of the cohorts mapped. So great. Let me see, any additional questions? Yeah, okay, so Melanie has put an email address there that'll reach all of us basically if you email that address. So you'll definitely get a response from that email address in the chat. And Carlos put the web page up, which gives a bit more details about the process as well.
So can I maybe just take a poll and ask anybody who is inclined to take the next steps and begin working with the Atlas group to just maybe raise your hand so we can just get a sense of what's going to happen after this meeting? Anybody just use the raise hand function? Don't be shy. There's one. Okay, there's a check. At least
I've been
two,
talking
three.
a little bit with Carlos and them already. So.
4, 5. That's excellent. 5 is like almost a 50% increase in what we have there already. So we're on a roll.
Just one note, people might have difficulty finding the raise hand function because I have the same problem. There's a reactions box down there. So
Yeah, and we'll at the upcoming meeting, I guess in a couple of weeks, the IHCC meeting, is it next week? I think we will then reiterate again that the message from this workshop, and we may well run this workshop again in a couple of weeks to try and reach more of the cohorts. But that would be really great to get the people to put their hand up here. It would be really great to start working with you to onboard your cohorts into the Atlas.
Yeah, and relating to this, we have prepared a short questionnaire that for the people that has attended, it will be really useful if you could fill it in, because it will help us know those people that want to begin to work with us to provide their course, and also to know how we can improve this workshop. So I pasted the link on the chat, and if you just can take 5 minutes to fill it in, it will be very helpful for us. So thanks.
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely follow up with an email to everyone who's attended with just all the links and the pages and things that are relevant for getting started with the your cohort mapping. So we'll follow up with an email. So if you miss any of the links and things, you'll get that. That shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, and Melanie was saying, I mean, if you have a specific timeline in mind, I mean, definitely let us know. If you're thinking when you think your time is going to be available to work on this, if you let us know beforehand, so we can kind of, so we can essentially make sure that some of Carlos's time is available at that same point, to work with you on the getting the mapping and the refining and the iterating on that. So yeah, if you have a specific timeline in mind, if you think you've got like a particular week where you want to work on this, or you think you're going to have time to do it, then yeah, please reach out to us so we know we can be ready to sort of engage, because clearly we don't. Clearly there's a timing issue and resourcing to make sure that we're aligned. Yeah, and I mean, it would be great to see your cohorts appearing in the Atlas, and hopefully we can drive traffic to your cohort then as well. So we can get users to be sent to your cohort, essentially, you'll get access requests hopefully from part of as a result of being listed. I guess that's the whole point of all of this. Right, any final points from anyone? I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover from the demo and the tutorial, and I think we would really looking forward to working with as many of you as possible then in the near future.
Thomas, it's Scott Sunseth, the Associate Director of the IHCC. And for everyone that's still online, I would like to mention that next week there is a members workshop. And if you're working with the cohort, you are invited. If you don't know anything about that, you can email myself or Ludi and we'll get you registered for that. Thomas mentioned there's a work group that'll be talking next week about their plans moving forward. You've heard many of those plans today, but that work group consists of a group of volunteers, and I'm sure Thomas would be welcoming to any people that want to participate in that work group moving forward. There's a lot of heavy lifting left to be done here. I think we can all see that. And so with many hands to lift that up, it'll become much easier. So I encourage you to participate in that work group if you're interested in this, beyond just harmonizing your data and getting your cohort data into the IHCC, but actually participating in making this a successful program altogether.
Yep, we'll have a team breakout as part of the IHCC meeting, so we'll be kind of discussing the kind of future directions and plans and the kind of bigger picture of the data team and related issues. So yeah, please come along. You're welcome, absolutely welcome to come along to that breakout. I think it's this time next week as part of the IHCC summit. Great. All right. Any final points from anyone? Otherwise, I think we are done. And we look forward to hearing from you. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.